Hey y'all, welcome back. We are watching Night Stalker. We're on episode 4, the finale, wrapping everything up, hopefully in some bruises. Purdy's going to get comfortable again. Fangs is in her swing, in her hammock, and I don't know where everybody else is. And this is why it takes her forever to settle down. Slow moving. That arthritis has really slowed her down. That and the dementia. She forgets what she's doing. She's going after my hand. And she's giving up. Am I being mean to you? Okay, I'm not going to sum up too much. We're going to continue following Gil and Frank. Apparently, some other agencies have gotten involved. I'd like to know if the San Francisco Police Department is going to give the name to Frank and Gil, and kind of go from there. Okay, let's watch the final episode. I gotta lean forward though, and she's not gonna like that.
He was always the kid who never quite fit in with anybody.
Now they're talking about Richard now.
Five Finger Richie.
Told you he had a criminal record.
All these
His father was trying to reprimand him, and he would tie him up to a cross in the cemetery overnight.
He had a lot of bad influences.
Not to mention cocaine and heroin and all the habits that he had.
I forgot about the murder in front of him. There's definitely pathology. Starting with another song.
He wanted to know where the books on horoscope and torture were.
Horoscope. They did it white instead of pink.
Compared against various Richard Ramirez prints.
One of which matched the fingerprint.
Wow.
Decide whether they release Richard's name and identification today or wait until we get him in custody.
All the other info's out there. You might as well release the name.
We asked for the media to meet with us this evening. We are satisfied.
I'm on the side of the LA team.
He goes into a liquor store and on the front page.
That's where he
every
got
news-
caught.
Walked out of there real quick, got on a bus, and the bus went
Oh,
down Olympic.
that's not where
All
he
had
got
to do
caught.
was- He then continued running in the northeast direction, ending up on Indiana.
So he's on foot.
All the neighbors chased him down the street.
You know, I said, oh my God, that's the guy.
The guy with
So the risk with going public with the information is if he wasn't the guy, if he was just some other dude that just happened to look similar to him, these people are hurting an innocent person then. And so that's the whole weighing the odds of people taking the law into their own hands. It worked in this case because he was the guilty party and they did catch him or catching him. But what if it had been a different scenario? So
They were starting to circle, getting closer and closer.
which puts the
To a
officer in
newspaper.
danger. There's a lot of bone also. The cheeks, the collarbone, shoulder bone.
Because I have fought people before, I've been stabbed, I've been shot at, but I ain't never fought nobody that's floating around a room. And this guy's gonna levitate right here and scare the bejesus out of me.
Don't blame Gil on that one.
And we just shouted. We were so thrilled.
It's a double-edged sword because I'm getting emotional. I don't know why. Remember, I cried everything. It's a double-edged sword because they're glad that he was caught, but now they've got to go through all the court stuff, unless he pleads guilty without trial, which may happen. But the long road is not necessarily over for the victims and their families.
He's the suspect we were looking for. So now comes all the work of tying him in to all of the other crimes that we're looking at.
Yep, he could make it hard on them, or he could make it easy.
In Kenneth Bianchi's old cell at Central Jail.
Oh, so it really was his cell. Okay. Burying himself. You know, I'd sit in court. I was there to, one, talk to folks about potentially being clients, but also letting them know what all their different options were. And then I was also there to help answer questions for attorneys, whether they were prosecution or defense, and answer any questions for the judge. I sat at one court hearing. It wasn't the Supreme Court. It was criminal court, regular criminal court. The case ended up going to Superior Court. Yeah, starting to get all my terms confused. And I remember the one attorney who's very experienced, she was a defense attorney, very experienced, was having to defend somebody that just did not know when to shut up. And they kept mouthing off while the trial was going on. They weren't supposed to be speaking at all. They weren't up on the stand. They weren't answering questions. They shouldn't have been talking at all, at least not out loud. And the attorney noticeably rolled her eyes several times and finally took him to the side and said, "You need to shut up. You need to shut up if you want me to defend you." Sometimes people just don't know when to shut up. And there is a lot of drama in the courtroom. In real life, not quite to the extent that they show on TV, although I'm not saying what they just showed was not real. But, like TV shows in general, Hollywoodize everything. And so it can be frustrating sometimes to see the games that the attorneys will play. That being said, their job is either to get the judge or the jury or both to not have any confidence in the witness or in the defendant or whoever it might be. And that's part of the job. And so one of the trainings I went to is, if you ever get subpoenaed and have to go onto the stand and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things they said was, do not play into the game that they do. Answer the question, keep it with the facts, and keep it short. And if the attorney, either attorney, defense or prosecution, want to elaborate any further, they'll ask you to do it and all this kind of stuff. There was another trial I was sitting in, and one of the officers, sheriff's deputies, was up on the stand. And one of the things he was doing was getting very defensive about some of the questions he was being asked, which were typical questions to be asked for whatever it was. I can't remember the exact scenario, but I remember him getting very defensive. And I was like, yep, that attorney did their job. They got the credibility of that officer to come down, so he's not as credible. So there is strategy and game playing and that sort of thing in drama, and I hate it, but I also understand it, if that makes sense.
Fame generates attraction. It's like
And
the
I'll never
Hollywood
understand
syndrome.
it.
There's a clown car of these women, right?
In all of my years of covering trials in
I
Los
just don't
Angeles,
get
I
it.
never you the best because you remind her of her teddy bear. That was me.
Aw,
What do you say, fellas? What do you say we dismiss all the kitty cases?
don't tell me it's going to screw them.
Prosecutors are expected to call 140 witnesses.
Wow.
And he said, swear upon Satan. Swear upon Satan. And I said, yes, I swear upon
That's
Satan.
Miss Pan. Are we going to hear the judgment?
Would the jury in the above entitled action find the defendant, Richard Ramirez, guilty of murder?
It was guilty after guilty after guilty. 43 counts.
I wished my dad would have been there.
It's
Wanted
just
him to be
emotionally
proud.
draining too.
Gil, he said, are you gonna go to my execution? He said, Frank, what about you? And I said, yes, I am. Killer's in custody, killer's dead. No more.
And executions require witnesses. Back to pink. I think it does white at the beginning and pink at the end. So, that's the Night Stalker. I agree with the reporter. He kind of got off easy, having the cancer kill him, rather than him have his rights restrained and eventually have his capital punishment. I am one who believes in capital punishment. That being said, you hear about cases the laws are getting better, but there's still a lot of problems with the justice system and people being accused of crimes, convicted on crimes that they ended up not doing. It's proven that they didn't do it. I can't remember the guy's name. I just remember it was a black man who was tried and executed, and they found out years later that he was not the one to do the murder. I forget exactly what it was, but it was some kind of murder. Situations like that, situations of folks who have done lots of time in jail and then released after finding out that they were not the ones that committed the crime. So these type of cases make you believe in capital punishment, but at the same time, you don't really want to execute somebody that may possibly be innocent. So, there's both sides to that. I had forgotten about the cancer. I think I had read that when I did the American Horror Story research on him because I wanted to know if he was still alive or not, and I had read that he had died, and I forgot about that. I think I pretty much commented on everything for the most part. I think Gil and Frank just show how mentally draining it can be to work on a case like that because you feel the pressure, you want to catch the person before somebody else dies and all this kind of stuff. And you do fight about what's the best way to handle it. And releasing the information to the public could have backfired. It almost did. He got tired of running, and so that's the only reason why he got caught. The other disadvantage to him surviving until his execution is all the groupies. I do not get it. I do not understand it. I don't know, even fame, I don't understand why you would want to be with somebody who hurt other people in the way that he did, especially. The prison I worked at, the guys had pen pals, and the one had like 8 women he was talking to, dedicated to each one of them. But I never understood it. The pedophile who was not in there for pedophilia, he was in there for robbery. He had never been caught for pedophilia, but was self-admitted pedophile. He had a fiance on the opposite end of the nation, and they were going to get married and all this kind of stuff. And she owned a daycare center. I just don't get it. And she knew about his pedophilia. Just don't get it. One of the things that they talked to us about in our training for the prison, new employee orientation stuff, they specifically talked about the relationships that the guys would try to have with us and that kind of stuff, whether it was emotional, whether it was physical, whether, this, that, the other thing. Don't do it. One, it's against the law. But two, it's part of the game. So I had been with the prisons. I was with the prison for 2 months before they actually had any prisoners. It was a brand new prison. So I was helping get everything ready and all that kind of stuff for the first 2 months. So 4 months after prisoners had gotten there, one of the ladies that worked in the kitchen got caught having sex in the freezer with one of the inmates. And it's like they took her to court for 3 misdemeanors and a felony, the felony being sleeping with the offender. I forget what the 3 misdemeanors were. And it's like she's ruined her life as far as ever getting another state job because she would never be able to work in the state system again after that happened. Yeah. So I don't get it. I don't understand it. Right before I left the prison, I had an inmate write me, and it was 2 weeks before I was supposed to leave. And he hands me, well, first of all, he wanted to meet and go over some homework. This is what we were doing. He was in one of the mental health groups that I did. And I always gave them a choice. If they met with me alone, they had to have the cuffs on. If they didn't want the cuffs on, an officer had to be present. Everybody I met with, trying to think if I'm being accurate with what I'm saying, I'm pretty sure everybody I met with always had the officer present because they never wanted the cuffs on. And I'm like, okay, fine. This guy didn't want the officers in there. And that was unusual. And so automatically my flag is going up where the officer is walking back and forth, peeking in the window, making sure I'm okay. Guy has his cuffs on. They cuff him in behind. And I'm going over the paperwork that he was wanting to review. And so it was about anger management. So we were talking about some of that. And so I start to wrap things up, and he goes, "Oh, no, 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 there's one more page to review." And so I pull the paper out, and it's a love letter. And I was like, the very first slide says, "I know I shouldn't be saying this," or something like that. And I'm like, "Oh God, I already don't like this." So I'm like, "Well, I have to turn this over. I have to write you a charge." And he was like, "Oh no, you don't have to do that. You can just throw it away. Pretend like it never existed." And I said, "No, no, gotta turn it in." And I did request that he just be held in cell rather than having to go to what is it called? Special housing, the SHU, because we were trying to the SHU is constantly full, and so we were trying to keep it from getting too full all the time. So I talked to the house manager. I said, let's just put him on cell restriction and handle it that way. And he was cool with it. And I was like, cool. Well, by the time I got the charge written up, the house manager had left for the day and it was a different officer in charge. And he's like, nope, he's going in the shoe because he didn't want the guy to retaliate on me. And I was like, he's not going to retaliate on me. Just don't do this. Because then they made me pick them out of all the guys because they didn't know which one I was talking about. So I'm standing, it was dinner time, and I'm standing in there in the commons. It's not a commons, um, but where, not a mess hall, not a commons. I forget what the term is, but for where they all eat. And they're like, "Do you see him? Do you see him?" And I'm like, "No, no, there's too many people looking at me." So, I finally described him well enough. The one officer is like, "Oh, I know which one it is." So they called him out and cuffed him and put him straight into the shoe. And I was like, "Oh God, ah, just what I needed." Don't like that kind of attention. Yeah. Are you holding me? They can't see this paw right here. I've worked too hard to get to where I am to risk any licensure, to risk any legal stuff, to risk any societal shaming. I'm not going there. So I just won't risk it. And I don't understand why other people do. I don't think I'll ever understand the groupies. Now, that being said, I'm not completely cold-hearted. There's certainly some good-looking guys that are bad boys. So I'm not I'm not denying that. I'm not saying I don't understand that part of things. I don't understand why people would risk or demean themselves or lower themselves or however you want to phrase it to the point that they would send naked pictures or sexy pictures or anything like that to people that they know have killed and murdered and maimed and raped and everything from little kids, little kids to 80 some year olds. I just don't get it. Okay, I've been rambling for quite a bit now, so I'm going to go ahead and quit. Thank you for joining me on this documentary, and maybe I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.